What's up, Packer fans? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I am your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. And we are on Tuesday, just a handful of days after the initial report that Aaron Rodgers would like out of Green Bay. And we are no closer to any sort of solution. And I think we're at the point where things are definitely going to probably get worse before they get better. There's probably going to be consistent reports of what went wrong, what hasn't gone well over the past decade plus. And we're just kind of at that stage right now where it feels like it's going to get worse before it gets better, right? So my goal today is to just hit pause, take a deep breath on everything, and just kind of review and recap what it exactly is that we know, that we really know at this point, and what we think we might know and what we really probably don't know. And just kind of recap everything to kind of gather all these thoughts together and really take a look at where we're at. So let's start off with what we do know about this situation. Like unequivocally, for a fact, we can make a pretty good assumption that these things are legitimately true. I think the first one is that Rodgers, in some capacity, if given his way right now, would ideally like out of Green Bay. We don't know the level or degree of that, but we know that there is a severe unhappiness. And again, I think we can jump to the logical conclusion that Rodgers would like to play at this point for a different team this season. And whether that's Adam Schefter, whether that's Ian Rappaport, whether that's the Packers having to go down and have multiple meetings with Aaron Rodgers to try to convince him to come and play, whether that's through offering him a new contract and yet nothing is done, whether that's Aaron Rodgers talking to Mike Tirico and not denying the report, saying that he wishes the report didn't come out, all of that adds up to at least some sort of idea that Rodgers is unhappy. And again, I think we can jump to the logical conclusion that if given the choice right now, if everything were just put to the side and Rodgers, if you could go up to Aaron Rodgers and ask him, would you rather play for Green Bay or a different team? I think we can logically say he would probably rather play at this point for a different team. Again, the levels of that we don't know at this point, but I think it's safe to say Rodgers is unhappy and he would like out if given his choice. I think it's also safe to say that there is, at minimum, a small disconnect between Aaron Rodgers and the front office of the Green Bay Packers. It's very tough to gauge how deep this is. It seems like Rodgers and his teammates have a great relationship. It very much seems that way. It seems like Rodgers and Matt LaFleur have a great relationship. It very much seems that way. It definitely seems at this point that Rodgers' frustrations are with the front office, the moves that they've made, the choices they've made, stringing him along and not necessarily, giving him the guaranteed money in future years to ensure that he is the franchise quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. I think those things are fair to say. And I don't think I'm saying anything shocking when I say there's clearly a disconnect between Aaron Rodgers and the front office of the Green Bay Packers. I think it's also safe to say that we know for a fact at this point that the Packers, as of right now, have zero intentions of trading Aaron Rodgers. The fact that Kyle Shanahan said straight up, he called Matt LaFleur and Matt LaFleur said, don't waste your time. I think that's very clear. The Packers have zero interest, and they have expressed that over and over and over through the course of the weekend that Aaron Rodgers is a Green Bay Packer. He is the leader of their football team, and they have no interest in trading him, and he will not be traded. So Green Bay has dug in on their side and said, up to this point, we are not trading Aaron Rodgers. We know that up until this point. We also do know, and I mentioned this the other day as well, we do know that Green Bay does have the flexibility to trade Aaron Rodgers if they want. And I'm not talking about from a trying to win a Super Bowl standpoint, right? If your goal is to win a Super Bowl, trading Aaron Rodgers not in your best interest. That is not something that is negotiable. But from a salary cap standpoint, they can, in fact, trade Aaron Rodgers and make it work. I know there's some people who have said that, the cap hit's too big, things like that. As I mentioned the other day, they do have the ability, especially if they trade him post-June 1st, which at this point it makes no sense to trade him pre-June 1st. Even if they make an agreement tomorrow on a trade, they would still do it post-June 1st. They would actually save money this year, save money next year, and save a ton of money in the following season in year 3. So it very, very much is a possibility, or at least it's a realistic avenue that Green Bay could explore if they wanted to go in that direction. I think the next thing we know that this is likely going to take a while. This has been happening now, as far as we know, for at least a couple months. There have been trips down to see Aaron Rodgers and talk to Aaron Rodgers. Things have not gone well up until this point. Aaron Rodgers is unhappy. The Packers, you can tell, the one thing you could tell over the weekend, very, very much so, is the gravity of the situation and how much Matt LaFleur and especially Brian Gutekunst felt that. There was no confidence in their voice when they talked about Aaron Rodgers returning to the Packers. You could tell they know what type of situation they're in and how much this matters. Not just, the cynic may say, well, of course, their job security depends on Rodgers and how well they do. Listen, I'm sure there's a piece of that, right? But nobody wants to be the person that is the cause of Aaron Rodgers, arguably one of the greatest quarterbacks, or if we want to make the argument, greatest quarterback of all time to play the game, arguably the greatest Packer of all time, to push him out the door based on decisions that you had or lack of communication or miscommunication. Nobody wants to bear that burden. And this is different in a way from, Ted Thompson saying we're going to go with our guy and then, Favre wanting to come back and things like that. You can tell Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur are not ready to pull the trigger on Jordan Love at this point. They want Aaron Rodgers back. So there's definitely a dynamic shift there. And you can tell they're not interested in being those guys that pushed Aaron Rodgers out of Green Bay. And you can tell they understood the gravity of the situation. But I don't think this is going anywhere anytime soon. I would be surprised even if something happened in the next 2-3 weeks, I'd be fairly surprised. And if you told me that this dragged on up until right close to the start of the season, that wouldn't surprise me either. So this is going to get weird, and it's probably going to get worse before it gets better, is my kind of read on the situation. And then I think the last thing that we know here, and I kind of mentioned this earlier with the Packers have zero intentions of trading Aaron Rodgers, but the Packers unequivocally want Aaron Rodgers to return at quarterback. I think we can say that, and I think we know that for a fact. Listen, if Jordan Love was ready to play and they continued to have issues with Aaron Rodgers behind the scenes and having some of these butting of heads and him wanting more control, and Jordan Love was ready to play and they felt comfortable with Jordan Love, the moment that the idea comes out that Rodgers is the one that's demanding a trade and he's upset and he looks like the one that's, kind of pushing the play button on all of this, you're smiling from ear to ear if you're the Packers, because they're not the ones who forced Rodgers out or anything like that. Now they can make that trade, get back a bunch of stuff in return, and go with Jordan Love, the guy that they drafted first overall, that they feel really good about and confident in, and they can kind of restart the clock a little bit with a new franchise quarterback. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that they feel confident at all in Jordan Love at this point. And it's very, very clear to me that they want Aaron Rodgers to be the quarterback of this team. They have no intentions of trading him, and they want him to be the starter both this year and in seasons to come. Those are the things, in my opinion, that we know, that are as close to lead pipe locks of knowing at this point that we possibly can have. And I want to start off here, I guess, kind of go back a step for a second and say, we just, there's no way for us to know, right? Now, maybe some of the Rob Demovskis, who I think has done a phenomenal job reporting on this, and the Adam Schefters, some of the people that are very close to the situation, maybe they do know a little bit more at this point and are maybe just trying to gather more sources and put things together. And I think some of those things will come out over time. But myself, you as the listener, 99.9% of America and football fans everywhere, we don't know the true story of what's going on. It's a he said, she said. There's numerous reports that have come out that have already been debunked from the fact that Rodgers was guaranteed to be traded to the fact that he was almost a Bronco. We're not sure on the Ted Thompson the Brian Gutekunst being fired thing yet. Like, there's just been reports everywhere, and we just don't know. And even if some of these or all of these reports are true, we don't know all the other things. These things rarely go from 0 to 100, right? It starts off with a minor disconnect. That minor disconnect turns into a slightly bigger disconnect. And then all of a sudden there's an issue. And then that issue turns into an argument. That argument turns into, deep-seated frustration. Deep-seated frustration. Maybe you Band-Aid over it for a while and then something else happens. And then that blows up and you bring up the things that all happened before. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, it snowballs into something that's much, much bigger. So even if we think we've pinpointed a couple of these, shatter points along the way, we don't know the full story. So let's go next. We covered the things that we are 99.9% certain we know. What are the things that we think we know? We think we know that there was never any guarantee to trade Rodgers away. That's been debunked and reported, from an opposite point of view, that has not been the case. Do we know 1,000,000% for sure? No, but I think we can mostly say that there was no guarantee to trade Rodgers. If you're not familiar, there was the report that came out that said the reason that Rodgers was upset was because Green Bay had promised that they were going to trade him this offseason and then reneged on it and didn't do it. So that is not the case. That is not what happened. So we can pretty much chalk that up to things that we think we know. The Packers have since acquiesced on their initial contract issues and have offered Rodgers a new long-term contract. Again, we don't know 1,000,000% for sure here, but there have been multiple reports that the Packers have upped their offer. They want him to be a Packer now and into the foreseeable future, and that they have tried to meet Rodgers at his contract demands, or whatever those may be. We think we know that at this point. We also think we know that Rodgers has been upset about a lack of potential involvement and partnership with Green Bay. And that was a word that he has used multiple times over his career when doing interviews, is partnership. I don't think he wants to have say over personnel decisions. I don't think that he wants to, run the franchise. I do think he wants to view it as a partnership. And many of you may have differing views on that, right? Some may have the old school thought process that coaches coach, managers manage, players play. In today's day and age, whether you're looking at it from an NBA standpoint and NFL standpoint, it's getting more common. The superstars have a ton of power. It just is what it is. It is easier to replace a GM. It is easier to replace a coach. It is easier to replace literally almost everyone else on your team than it is your superstar face of the franchise. And I'm not talking about the Houston Texans and Laramie Tunsil, who's their best player, right? Like if Laramie Tunsil makes demands, you're probably like, all right, whatever, Laramie, we're good. I'm talking about the LeBron James, the Giannis Antetokounmpos, the Kevin Durant's, the Aaron Rodgers, the Tom Brady's, the creme de la creme, the top of the top, the goats of the goats, right? Those type of players have an immense amount of pull within their franchises. And again, it's easier to replace everyone else than it is generally to replace that player. Now, Green Bay is interesting in the fact that they don't have an owner. If they have an owner's probably going to side quicker on the side of the player, the franchise, the face of the franchise than they are the coach or the GM. When you don't have an owner and you have a board of directors and a president that oversees things, it gets a little bit murkier. So again, we think that we know that Rodgers has been upset about that lack of partnership. I think the Jake Kumerow story is a great example of that. He goes out of his way to mention how he likes how Jake Kumerow is playing, how he connects with him from a quarterback to receiver relationship, and 2 days later they release him. My guess is with no communication with Rodgers before doing so. Those are the type of things that can fracture those relationships. Those are the things we think we know at this point. We also think Rodgers probably wasn't too keen on the selection of Jordan Love. I personally don't think that this was actually due to the selection of Jordan Love as much as it was how things were communicated with Rodgers. It sounds like Rodgers was not called or communicated with, and I think we can actually put this in the category of things we know. I think this has come out, and Brian Gutekunst even said he wishes he would have communicated things better, that Rodgers was not communicated with that Jordan Love was being taken or that it was even potentially going to be an option. Marlon Mack, if you remember last year, the Indianapolis Colts ran like a post-draft series where they showed scenes from their locker room and things like that. They went out of their way, the Colts did last year, before they selected Jonathan Taylor in the second round. In the second round, running back, they went out of their way to call, or I think they may have texted, either called or texted Marlon Mack to say, hey, we're bringing in another running back. You're still the guy. We have a ton of faith in you. We think you and Jonathan have the ability to be a tremendous duo. Just wanted to give you a heads up. And Mack, I think, came back right away. He's like, yeah, absolutely. Bring him in. Well, let's go. Let's get this done. And was all excited about it. But the point here is that the Indianapolis Colts went out of their way to make sure that Marlon Mack was in the know. Their solid but unspectacular starting running back, who was in the last year of his deal, knew that the Colts were going to bring in Jonathan Taylor as a running back in the second round. But in the same draft, allegedly, Aaron Rodgers was not called or communicated with that the potential next franchise quarterback was going to be selected in the first round. That is a major issue and a major communication breakdown. And I think we can put that in to things that we are pretty certain of at this point. I think we also can be fairly certain that as of this moment, Jordan Love is not ready. Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur all but echoed those sentiments of that they just don't know at this point of where Jordan Love is. They have faith in him. They think he can be a really good player. How could they possibly know? No preseason, no rookie minicamps, no OTAs, number 3 quarterback all year, which if you're not familiar, number 3 quarterback does not get a ton of snaps. That is not even scout team stuff a lot of times. Like Rodgers is taking the lion's share, especially when you're a team that's working to compete for a Super Bowl. Tim Boyle is then going to get all the backup reps and a lot of the scout team reps, and Jordan Love gets whatever scraps are left over, which is not much. How could he possibly be ready to take all of this in, all of this on, and be the starting quarterback of the Packers this year? And again, if Green Bay felt very sure that he was ready and that he was ready to be the franchise quarterback and lead them, they trade Rodgers. It's not a big deal. They move on. And that's certainly not the case at this point. What are some things that we are unsure of at this point? Has Aaron Rodgers really asked for Brian Gutekunst to be fired? We don't know. We've heard both sides of the story that yes, Rodgers has been reported. No, that's not something that Rodgers wants. We just don't know. We're unsure of. And there's going to be a lot of things that we're unsure of over the course of this process. Again, I mentioned this earlier, what's everything that's happened to lead up to this point of Rodgers boiling over? Usually it's just not one or two things. It's things that happen through the course of a longer period of time that led to this being the case. And that's why it's so impossible to say, well, I think Aaron Rodgers is at fault, or I think Brian Gutekunst is at fault, or it's Mark Murphy, or it's whatever, the sledding hill, whatever else you want to say. We don't know all of those conversations that took place. We don't know if Rodgers is being petty or if he seriously got slighted throughout this entire process. We don't know if Brian Gutekunst and the Packers did everything they could to try to communicate this with Rodgers and, pick a quarterback who might be the quarterback 5 years down the line while telling Rodgers that he's going to be the guy and the franchise quarterback. And we just don't, or they completely botched everything. We just don't know. And unless you were in the building, I don't know how you could. So there's a lot that we remain unsure of. We also don't know how dug in is Aaron Rodgers in this situation. And is there even a 5% chance that he would consider playing for Green Bay? Is it 10? Is it 30? Is it 50? Where is that level at the moment? How far are the Packers willing to go to get Aaron Rodgers back? Are they willing to give him more control of the team? Are they willing to give him whatever? Like, how far are they willing to go to say, Aaron, come back, we're desperate, we'll do anything? What's that point? What's the point of no return for them where they're saying, we're not going to do this and it's time to move on? And whatever Green Bay is willing to do, we don't know, will it be enough? We just don't. So those are the things that we are unsure of at this point. I'm sure there's more that I'm probably missing because this is like a soap opera that's tough to keep up with. I'm sure there's message boards or tracking everything, but it's just really tough to even keep track of everything already at this point. And then lastly, what are some key items to remember? I would say, first of all, is that any trade is likely, if they did decide to trade him, is not likely until June 1st at the earliest. Even if a trade was agreed to tomorrow, it would happen post June 1st because of salary cap implications. There's no reason to trade him pre-June 1st at this point. So whatever happens, even if something accelerates insanely quick, you can rest assured that the earliest that the trade would actually be processed and approved would be June 1st. So for people that are talking about the huge salary cap this year, there's just no reason at this point to trade him prior to June 1st. So we can kind of take that talking point out. The other thing that we know, and is an item to remember, is that Rodgers would be owed almost $30 million if he retired. So he would have to basically write a check to Green Bay for almost $30 million if he were to retire and say, I'm done playing football. Does that matter to him? Probably not. I don't know. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Who knows? But he would owe a pretty hefty sum to be paid back to Green Bay if he did decide to retire. Also noting, I've had people question this, Green Bay would retain Aaron Rodgers' rights if he did retire. So even if he does retire and then a year from now says he wants to come back, Green Bay still owns all of those rights, and he would have the remaining 3 years still left on his contract. He doesn't lose a year because he retired for a year. He would still have 3 full years. The contract would total, and he'd have 3 years left on his contract. I would also say here, another item to remember is that I would say Rodgers has leverage, but the Packers probably have a little bit more. They have him under contract. They don't have to trade him, and they can kind of sit on things until he decides what he wants to do. And they could also threaten to trade him to a crappy situation. Like, there's a variety of different things that could happen. Rodgers doesn't have a no trade clause. So Rodgers definitely has leverage here. No question about it. But I do think if you were to weigh it out, I would probably argue that Green Bay has just a little bit more. That being said, I would also say that Rodgers is probably the one to benefit by holding out. The longer, the better it is for him if he really wants out. If this goes into training camp, to me, or if he even gets close to training camp, to me, Green Bay has to make a strong decision. And ultimately, they might feel at that point, if Rodgers doesn't come back, it's a lost season anyway. But the longer that goes on, the more it poisons that locker room, the questions that everyone's going to get answered. Jordan Love probably has to take the mantle as starting quarterback in training camp, which is probably less than ideal. The longer this goes, and the closer that this gets to preseason and, heaven forbid, regular season, the benefit goes to Rodgers, because it really puts the Packers on the hot seat for what they're going to do this season. And whereas if you're Rodgers, and if you're asking for a trade, if a week before the season starts, the Packers trade him to Denver will gladly still accept him, and he'll go out and he's, I guarantee he feels that he can still play at a high level and lead that team into the playoffs. So I think the longer that this goes on, the more pressure that it puts on Green Bay. And I think the last key thing to remember here is just how difficult is this to repair? Is there a point of no return? If he really asks for Brian Gutekunst to be fired, which again, we don't know, can you come back from that? Personally, I think there's an opportunity to, as I mentioned the other day, it's not like Brian Gutekunst and Aaron Rodgers actually have to, do that much on a day-to-day basis and communicate that much with each other. But if Rodgers is really looking for that partnership and that's what matters to him, is there coming back from this? It's really, really tough. And I think, again, those are all the key items to remember as we try to keep an open mind and look at this. So where do we go from here? I tweeted out that, in my opinion, it was time to trade Aaron Rodgers. I want to put a disclaimer on that. Obviously, clearly, and unequivocally, if the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers can mend things and work this out, which we just sort of saw with the Seattle Seahawks and Russell Wilson to some extent, right? I don't think it was quite this deep-seated, but to some extent that just happened and everything seems fine right now. If they have the ability to mend that relationship, that is obviously clearly the best possible scenario for everyone involved. Rodgers gets to come back to a team that can compete for a championship, that now has invested everything into him. He is the face of the franchise again. He can go out and try to win a Super Bowl, and he gets to continue his legacy in Green Bay. The Packers don't have to move on from Aaron Rodgers. They don't have to basically start from scratch trying to find a new franchise quarterback right now. They give more time to Jordan Love to develop, unless they have to trade him. That's obviously and clearly the best possible solution for both sides. If that's not possible, if that can't happen, then to me, and the closer that gets to training camp, to me, you have to consider the trade. You get nothing back by him retiring. You get nothing back from him sitting out a season. He's already reaching a point in his career where he's getting older, and there's not much of a window left. If we're being real, based on the really crappy situation that Green Bay's at in the salary cap, their window, for the most part, closes after this year. Like, this is really the all-in year where you're trying to go out and win a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers, keep the band together, and then you have to make a ton of drastic changes. So I would make a strong argument that over the next 3 to 4 years, your best chance to win a Super Bowl is this upcoming season. And if that's your best chance, and it's probably what, maybe 6 teams that have a real chance at it, 6 to 8, Green Bay is one of those. You lose out on that opportunity this year. And then, you're trying to rebuild and get back to the promised land sooner rather than later with a fast rebuild, getting younger, trying to find your franchise quarterback. Is it ideal? No. As I mentioned the other day, Green Bay has a crap sandwich on their plate right now, and they're trying the best they can. If they have to trade him, if they have to move on, the only thing that they can do is try to get back as much ketchup as possible to cover that crap sandwich to make it taste not quite as bad. It is still a crap sandwich, and it's still going to taste putrid, but you're trying to do your best you can so that it can cover it as best as possible and not taste quite as bad. That's what it is. It's not perfect. It's not great. You're not going to get what you would like in return. You're not going to get another MVP franchise quarterback. I don't think, the idea of Rodgers for Russell Wilson, I think, is a pipe dream. I don't think there's any chance they would touch Deshaun Watson. It's going to taste like a crap sandwich. You just try to make the best that you can out of it and do what you can. But if this gets worse and it becomes the point of no return, in my opinion, it's time to trade Aaron Rodgers and get what you can and make the best out of that really crappy situation. That's going to do it for me. This is not an easy topic. I get that. There are a ton of very real emotions attached to this. I'm not going to be 100% right on this, right? There's too much, and everyone's shared experience and fandom is going to be involved in that situation. But I think we can agree that this is a very challenging topic. It's a very difficult time to be a Green Bay Packer fan. Mom and dad are fighting, and you just want them to resolve it and make things better and go back to the way they were. Will it happen? Only time will tell. Thanks for joining me. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I'll be right back here tomorrow, hopefully not having to talk as much about Aaron Rodgers. But until next time, unless maybe he's coming back and everything's fixed, then I would be love to talk about him tomorrow. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.